going on in the building is continuing to work on the planning for upgrades to the emergency department. It's predominantly a refresh of all the spaces, but we are also, of course, looking at some functional upgrades, particularly looking at the entry to get into the building and into the department, improving that, as well as improvements, particularly to behavioral health areas for adolescents and also for adults. So it's not just refresh, there are some functional upgrades to that. So there have been some meetings with the stakeholders. We're trying to finalize the scoping now. I know we've been fortunate to get some philanthropic funding as well, so we're excited to keep this one going. Next one is outpatient plaza refresh. We've, I think, discussed this briefly before. There will be some clinical departments, for example, outpatient rehabilitation will remain. So our focus right now is to scope the refresh needed for those departments that are remaining and for the public spaces. And then as we look forward, we'll also be making some infrastructure upgrades to the facility, since it's a 30-year-old facility, but all of that is planned. And then in addition, other upgrades or refreshes that we will do to the facility as we move people out, begin to move people in. And this will tie to our discussion of legacy buildings here a little later in the presentation. So those are the main sort of activities surrounding that. And again, the construction contract, all contracts are nearly completed for the Gleck Center. Next slide. Yes.
When you use the term refresh, how broad is that? I think of painting and cleaning. Does that include upgrade of technology or care delivery?
Not so much that. It really is focused more on the finishes surfaces. So it's not just painting. It could be reflooring, new ceiling, new lighting, that sort of thing. But what it generally does not mean is that we would pull out walls and completely redo spaces. So again, these are, for the most part of the building, people will be moving out. Now, I will say that should there be an advantage to the operations of those clinics that are staying by doing that, then yeah, that is part of the scope. But the rest of the building would be more complete surfaces, and again, lighting I think would be another big thing.
Okay.
And then, of course, the counterpart to that is upgrades to things like building mechanical systems, ventilation, electrical, that sort of thing too. That's all behind the scenes that you won't see, but helps to extend the life of the building. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. Let's move on to the outpatient health center. This is a photo of the recently completed drive and walkway that now have all the brick paving that match up with that of Gleck. And the photos I have here today came in at immediately after New Year's, just before all the snow hit, so you can still see everything. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so these are the major activities that have been going on or are going on now. The first bullet point, a lot of work at the loading dock and pedestrian connector on the east side of the building, the connector that ties to the Apex garage. Concrete foundations are fundamentally in, structural steels in fabrication. So work will continue on that through the cold months here as we get that ready to go. You see that the brick paver installation is completed. So the bulk of the work on the outside of the building is wrapping up. You're not going to see so many people there, but it has started to ramp up on the inside of the building. So interior construction now includes revisions to our existing metal stud walls and drywall on the lower levels as we widen corridors and do some minor reconfiguring there. That will include, as you note here, removal and salvage of door frames. As we pull the walls apart and relocate those, the door frames will come out and then they'll go back in once they're in the new location. Same is true with, you can see the casework and accessories. On the upper floors that were not as far along, the layout for the new walls are going in, but probably the key thing going on there would be the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So the work that's being done overhead to reconfigure some of the ventilation, and that's related to both the layout that's going to happen in there, as well as the addition of the procedure rooms we've talked about before. There's added ductwork and ventilation to go in. So all that kind of activity is already underway under levels 4 and 5. We've also got some long lead electrical equipment. The orders have been placed, and that's in fabrication in order to help us maintain the schedule. The total workforce on site is now ramped up to 70 people compared to, I think the last time we talked, it was in the 20 to 30 range. And so that's going to continue to go up as we start to spread the work on the remaining floor. So things are moving very quickly out there now.
Hey, Jim, it's
Jim, I have
Rob.
a question.
Yes.
What's the driver of the change order resulting in the removal of doors and casework and toilets?
On the lower floors, all of that installation had been completed, but the corridors were dimensioned for a medical office building. And what we've done is upgraded this facility to an ambulatory care facility. So that widens the corridors by an extra foot. What that does is it allows us to be able to maneuver people in there in carts and basically be able to utilize that space to a higher degree. That's driven in part too by adding procedure space is sort of driving that code upgrade. So many of those walls simply have to be relocated.
I got it. So what was the cost of the change order?
That's all built into the change order right now. I can't give you a specific for that.
Just a rough estimate on the project. I mean, so be prepared to give me an update at the next board meeting. I'll ask the question.
Let me do that. I'd rather have the knowledge rather than speculate that.
And for my education, how do those change orders get approved?
How do they get approved?
You can let me know at the board meeting too. You can just let me know. So I mean,
I can do that.
How does a change order of that magnitude get approved? So it's more educative for me, Jim, as opposed to anything. So my hands up lowered. I'll go back on mute. So
sure. Okay. There's a very detailed process we go through to analyze the implication for each location and for each trade, but I can go in more detail with you on that. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is just simply a site plan showing the zones of exterior activity. You can see the rectangular shape out front. We're pretty much complete with the work out front, and then the more square shape in the back is the loading dock and the connector that's still underway. And that will continue through the winter. Steel comes out and we complete the structure for that. Next slide. Just some site photos. Again, these are from about a week and a half ago. Foundation work going in on the east side of the building. Next slide, please. And this is, again, the stacking diagram of the building. What I've highlighted here is the upper floors where that work is ongoing for the overhead mechanical electrical system modifications, the rough end up there. On these floors, quite a bit of the framing was still not complete yet. So in that case, there's really not much to tear out. In fact, it's all just going to be under the new layout. So that layout is what's going on. It's these lower floors that were further along where we're dealing with pulling a few things out and having to add back.
Well, Jim, I got another question. So
sure.
On the ground floor, I'm assuming it's ground floor. It's not below ground where radiation oncology is, correct?
Correct. Ground floor. And
there's been an ability made within that ground floor to be able to move accelerators in and out. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. Yes. In that zone, by the way, that's in gray, the radiation oncology, medical oncology, that's actually built to institutional standards. So it's an inpatient capable building. And yes, it was designed with the plan for how equipment can move in and out of there. Okay. Next slide, please. And these are just some views of the work on the interior. Those to the left are on the lower floors where more has been done, and on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of photos of the overhead work going on now, much more sparsely studded out. So that work is yet to come. Any further questions on that? Okay, let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you a 90-day look ahead. I think the next time we get together as a committee of the board will be in April, but over the next 90 days, The loading dock and pedestrian connector should be quite a far way along. They're going to continue to work on the overhead rough in on the interior of the building. We do have additional doors and frames that will be procured because we now have, instead of open office space for admin, we've actually turned that into clinical. So there's a lot that we can reuse, but some that we'll have to buy new. So that's in progress. And then mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. So there'll be a lot more completed over the next 90 days. And I think during this time, too, we're starting to schedule some walkthroughs of the building so people can get a sense of how it's coming together and what it's going to be like.
Jim, are we still on schedule?
We are on schedule. Yes.
And Jim, can I ask a question about, I thought I read in the documents that a certain dollar amount of a change order had to come back to the board. Do you know what that is, or?
Not for this one. This one is a little different, I think, but I will be bringing back to you what's happening here.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious about, like, Ron, I just want to learn about, because I did read that there is a certain dollar amount for a change order or change in the project in terms of the cost that has to come back to the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing, Jim, I think the board wants to understand. We had a meeting. We talked about changing the purpose of the meeting. We improved some of that, but I think people are trying to understand how much was in that, and since then, how much has been a change order. So I think probably at the next board meeting, if you can just update us on kind of step by step how this occurred, how much is change order, how much is when we repurposed the meeting. I mean, repurposed the building and did that. I think it'll be a lot easier to understand.
Okay, I will definitely do that. But this is just so. I'm sorry,
Dr. Walker. I think Ms. Dumas' question and mine are the same. So we just want to understand the process. So
right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, but I don't think you need to go into the detail of the Apex. I think it needs to be a change order that exceeds this amount of money, requires coming back to the board. In this case, the total was X. It didn't require going back to the board. Or in this case, the total was Y and it went back to the board on this date and got approved. I'm just trying to educate myself so I can become a better board member in the future. So
no, it's a good question. I think a little bit of both. I agree with you. I don't know off the top of my head what dollar causes us change order. What Ms. Dumas pointed out, under what circumstances. I think it'd be good for all the board to understand that. But also, this thing has changed so many times since this thing. I just think it won't take more than 5 minutes. We started here, and also we're probably going to do this anyway because in February we'll have 3 new board members who won't know any of this. So
I think. Jim, as you do this, to me, the point of the question, and goes back to Dr. Walker's point. So my prior life, you had a contingency built into your budget. So as long as it didn't exceed the contingency, it didn't have to come back to the board. But once either a certain dollar amount or blowing through your contingency required it, and I think we're just understanding what rules of engagement you have and what lanes you have to operate in is what I'm really looking for. And as long as this one hit those, I'm good with it. So
okay, I understand. I will get that put together for the group.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this one before I move on? Okay. Hearing none, let's go to the next. Okay, this is, remember we started the topic about all the other activity that will be going on while we're constructing it, and in particular transition planning and activation. So I'd like Eileen Hayes to give us a quick update on that, if you would, please.
You're on mute, Eileen.
I was going to say, I think you're on mute. Still on mute, Eileen.
all right, Jim, pick up the baton and just run with it.
Okay, and there she is. No, not okay. Okay. So keep working on it, Eileen. So transition planning, we brought this up last time, how the the planning for that is coming together. So as you note here, these are the activities since the last time, the operational assessment of the clinics, and in particular been finalizing all the equipment, planning schedules, lists, all that, and coordinating what's going to happen within this building with also the routine capital that's happening other places, so that we got everything accounted for. Furniture acquisition, have been doing the same kind of activity with that. We expect that bid process to be ready to go toward the end of the Q1 of this year. And then our operational workforce stakeholder committees are getting formed, and we expect that to be starting in March. And all this is in preparation for the physical move in and start of operations in the building. So we'll have more on this, quite a bit more next time, but let you know that there's a lot of activity in that area right now as a companion to the construction that's going on.
So Jim, I'm just going to ask one more or make one more comment regarding transition planning and activation. You just had a Joint Commission triennial survey.
Yes.
And any findings from that survey need to be fed to the operational workforce stakeholder committee so they can look and see as they do the review if there's any lessons learned from the Joint Commission survey that need to be implemented in the Apex building. Now's the time to do it.
Appreciate that. Dr. Golub, I think you were on. You would probably best respond, but we're going through that right now.
I just want to make sure that you're crossing over and taking the lessons learned from the last survey and preventing heat runs from the future. Because once they come back in 45 days, depending when this building's open, if they have to come back in the future, this building's open for that, their walkthrough. So.
Nope, I understand. Absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm more familiar with obviously the sort of life safety and environmental care, but I've been involved in all of it. So yes, we're staying connected with that. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. We do have a few ambulatory enabling projects that we're completing now. I just wanted to give you a quick update on those. We reported on them last time. So at Parma, we have expansion of the MAC or autism clinic on the second floor. So that one, the construction has completed and we're getting activation here this Q1. Heart and vascular is a design of that is complete and bidding that now. And then pain management, we've also are bidding that and expect to start construction here shortly. So that's what's going on with those. And that's sort of the last of the group of projects at Parma under this one. Next page, please. We do have some work going on at Beechwood as well. So the Express Care Phase 2, radiology and support spaces, that activation is starting this month. I think we were just about completed construction last time we talked. And then for the medical specialties and pain management, so we had CDs ready for permit. So that will be going out for bid shortly. And that kind of wraps up the projects we currently have underway under the ambulatory enabling. Any questions about those? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. I'm going to do a quick update here. This is really focused on sort of the open space as well as the parking. I know these are a little difficult to read, but I think if you back off and just see the campus as a whole, that will be helpful. We've been working with a consultant to help us understand what we have on campus, how it operates, and what our opportunities are. So I just wanted to give you a few diagrams here that shows how they've analyzed it for us. So the left-hand one, this group of 6 shows, our patient and visitor areas versus those that are really staff. The middle top shows all the gateways, how people get access both visually and physically. So you see it's both left, right, which in this case is north, south, but also down toward the bottom of the page is as you come from the community and interface with the campus. There's also a transit and shuttle bus study. That's the top right. And then as we get toward the bottom, you can see the pedestrian access, and that's simply an arc showing the sort of a mile zone or thereabouts, and then all the pedestrian movement. And then the last two are starting to give us an indication of the spaces we do have and the types of spaces they are. So all of this has been gathered. If we go to the next slide. we could have the next slide. There we go. This just starts to show us a heat map of where people are, where the busiest functions are, and what's close to our entry exit. So with this kind of information, we'll be able to develop, here's what the opportunities are. So I'm going to turn this over to Greg Zuka.
Jim, hold on for 1 second.
Sure.
Dr. Walker has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. And maybe we're going to talk about that. I just want to know, I haven't heard what are our level of complaints about parking? Because that's always something that we hear about. Have we lowered the volume on that, or are we still getting a lot of complaints about parking?
I have not heard of any recently. Brian Rentschler, I think you're on. Brian and I talked about this.
Right. Yeah, we have not seen any complaints really coming through with parking. The changes and swap out of the decks has really helped. And we've also processed the capital for additional shuttle to help support our patients get from the main parking deck over to the main entrance.
Good. With these temperatures, we need to be ready because people aren't going to be able to walk out 10-degree weather very far. So, yeah.
No.
Patient relations grievances have also decreased, specifically around opening the OPP as well.
Right. Good.
Dr. Alexander has her hand raised.
So don't mean to be the fly in the ointment, but I did receive a handwritten note that read right before leaving for DC. And they really just talked about, they ended up in the wrong garage that they were told to, the instructions on my chart did not match where they actually had to park. And so they ended up in the wrong garage. And then there was a sign saying that the shuttle would be there, which matched what was in my chart, but a shuttle never came and they had to walk. The whole point of the letter was, not terribly negative, but just like, can we fix our communications around this? And if we say that there's a shuttle, there should be a shuttle. And there was no shuttle, or they were told the shuttle was only for the employees and so forth. So that was the only glitch. Not that it was just a parking issue. It was really more about communication around the parking. So we'll need to just work on that a little bit to clean it up. But they did compliment the staff, and one staff member actually got the patient and the family back to the car and swiped them out. So in the end, they were like, everybody really rallied to support us, but you could avoid this in the future. So that was the only thing that came to me personally.
Good.
Good, thank
stay
you.
on top of that. So it's a big patient issue, so we need to stay on top of it. It sounds like it's better than it was a year ago when we were.
For sure.
Every other letter was about parking there.
Right. I think the reshuffling of the garages and getting the entry into Glick allowed us to sort of decompress both garages. So now typically both the Apex and the View garage have excess spaces during the day. Whereas in the beginning, we were just totally full in the View garage. So this helped a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, then back to this slide just before I hand it to Greg. I just wanted to note that we've had a couple of different focus groups that are internal that include people like patient reps and facilities and others to help our planning team understand how things work and what the opportunities are. And we've got more coming. So I'd like to ask Greg if he can to jump in now and talk a little about what's been going on in community discussions and more broadly. Greg?
Great, thank you. So yes, as Jim indicated, as part of this process of kind of relooking at the open spaces on the main campus, and in particular the green space in front of Glick, which is approximately 3 to 4 acres of property, looking at ways that we can honor the findings from the neighborhood master plan in terms of creating welcoming and engaging spaces. We've had some conversations as this process has gone on. I've met and meet bi-monthly, every other month, with Metro West Community Development Organization as this process is going on. and is part of that neighborhood master planning group. So it's a larger group comprised of the Councilwoman Jasmine Santana, the City of Cleveland Planning Department, several community ambassadors. These are 4 residents that volunteered their time during that planning, and the Cleveland Foundation. And as we work through this process, we're continuing to stay engaged with them, and having conversations about how we are pivoting from that broader vision plan to one that's that we're seeing here before us. That's going to be comprised of smaller spaces, but just as well planned and reflective of the vision for the neighborhood master plan that was done for the Clark Fulton neighborhood. And also, as we go through this, you can go to the next slide. We are having conversations and continuing to work on things that have already developed out of that neighborhood master plan. And we're working on 2, public art installations that would be around the campus. So the first is we developed a partnership with the Cleveland Sculptural Center. They received a grant from the Joyce Foundation to work with an artist, Puerto Rican-born artist who resides in Chicago. And you can see here she's designed a bus shelter that is an homage to the type of architecture and design that occurs on the island of Puerto Rico. And so she's going to be we're going to be installing this bus shelter at one of the RTA bus stops. So this will be located at the corner of South Point Drive and Scranton, where currently it's just a bus stop sign. There's no place for seating or anything of that nature. So this will give a little bit of respite, but also, provide some sculptural interest and community art interest. Again, as I said, we're working with the Cleveland Sculptural Center on that. The second is working very closely with Land Studio as well as local artists. You could see here's a mural that will be installed on Via Sana, which is the affordable housing project that exists on our campus on Metro Health Drive and West 25th Street. This actually was a piece of artwork that came from a project we did in the neighborhood through a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. This was one project that didn't get funded, but we were able to find some additional local funding sources to help to make this come to fruition. Unfortunately, we ran out of good weather towards the end of the fall, but as soon as spring comes around, that will be installed. And this, again, just kind of goes to show, we're beginning to and continuing to work with the community to implement those findings from the neighborhood master plan. Public art was a very big piece of that, as well as conversations we've had with community members, patients, and employees of all the great artwork and all the great design that had been done with Glick, and how welcoming and inviting it is. Really kind of taking that out into bring that outside the 4 walls of the Glick Center and into our open spaces as well, and being very intentional about making these welcoming spaces. So again, we're continuing to work on this, and as that open space plan, vision plan gets a little bit more concrete, and Jim and I will be engaging more focused engagements with key stakeholders, and also having community input and community meetings to begin to talk about, okay, taking that kind of concept, how do we bring it to fruition and implement it?
This is really great, lovely. I just, FYI, there's a typo in your Spanish rhyme.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, where it says Samara mañana, the last two words, it should be sanara. And instead of the M, it should be an N. Sanara mañana.
Got it.
If it's any consolation, I'm not good at spelling in English either, so.
Right. Any questions for Greg or on this topic?
Have the community, are they, feeling connected? Any concerns?
Yeah, again, I think right now, as we're developing this kind of, again, a vision for what open spaces could be, it's not a design, it's not a set design. We're just trying to set the kind of the parameters. We will have more engaged conversations about design when we do have those community meetings. But anecdotally, as I've been talking with folks, again, I would say the feedback that I've received is, disappointment in not having the grand park plan that was out there, but a general understanding of the needs that the hospital has to serve patients,
right,
and an openness and a openness to look and partner together on a path forward.
And that's fine. And again, we just need to emphasize, we understand things change.
Yep.
We ended up with more people coming to campus than we anticipated in the original design, and we need to have, the parking and everything else we need to accommodate them. It was not from a change in our desire to work with them or anything like that. It's just the original plans we had for how the campus is, things have changed since COVID, and we need the space.
All right, thank you, Greg. If there's not anything else on that topic. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, I want to take a few minutes to talk about activities surrounding being able to relocate people out of our legacy buildings and are planning for ultimately demolition of a number of them. What you see under the first bullet point, I think we've gone over it before and it's in the meeting minutes. It's still our expectations at this point, given the population we have on campus and taking into account who needs to stay here and who may be able to leave campus. So what we are doing is really doing an update to the planning that was done probably about a year and a half ago when we were starting the redesign of the components of Apex. At that point, we'd had a pretty reasonable plan based on who was on campus at the time of a crosswalk between where departments were who were not going to be in GLEC or in the outpatient health center. And those would be things like the administrative components of the clinical departments, for example. There are other functions on campus that we've talked about before, the food food as medicine, the opioid safety, that are not clinical departments but need to be on campus. So we had a crosswalk showing where theirs were going to go. We need to update that, which is what we're doing right now. There have been some changes as some functions have come back to campus. And so that's what we're in the middle of, and sort of revamping that crosswalk of where people are and where we're going to put them to make sure what buildings we can get out of and what issues we have. So we're in that process now, and then we're going to continue that and engaging our leadership team and helping make decisions about going forward. So that's one component, is finding the right spaces. Second component, which gets to the next page, I think.
Hold on before we go to the next page. Dr. Yes. Alexander, you still on the line?
Yes, sir.
My only comment is, you look at the buildings that are slated for demolition. Adaptive reuse is dry labs or wet labs for researchers. I don't know how badly research space is needed, but as you do demo, one of the recommendations I would have is, carefully look from a research perspective to see if it could be easily converted to either dry lab or wet lab space. Because even prior to going down, it may, improve physician morale related to research, and just a suggestion, lesson learned from my past. So
yeah, no, that's very helpful. And I think one of the things we're also talking about, because the high school on campus is in the Ramel Camp research space. So, thinking about moving that over to the outpatient pavilion building gives the students potentially space that better meets their needs, and allows us to convert back to mothers. So point well taken.
And that's exactly it. We've noted Bramwell Camp is our basis for research. We've already discussed some opportunities in addition to the high school one.
Yeah, but Jim, my only comment is the researchers always don't feel they have enough space, and if these buildings are lying fallow, this just gives an opportunity to address an issue amongst the campus and improve, physician satisfaction and researcher satisfaction. Enough.
Okay, fair enough. We need to come back to you with more detail about how much of these buildings are filled up that we're going to have to unfill. And then we can talk about what the opportunities are there. But another component that feeds into this facility condition effort we've gone through with Gordian, the company Gordian, that does an analysis of the existing facilities and lets you know the investments needed. That's been complete. So now we understand with all of our older buildings, the kinds of investments we need to make in the infrastructure to get them up to speed for what the original purpose was. And of course, beyond that, if there are additional purposes. So we've got that information as well. The last piece of information that feeds into this is doing the engineering analysis for the utilities that serve these buildings, because some of those are directly connected into the typical city water and that sort of thing. But the heating and cooling for many of these buildings comes from the current power plant on the east side of campus on View Drive. And the buildings toward the west side of campus are fed through the buildings between the power plant and that. And many of those buildings are ones we want to tear down. So we have to figure out how to reroute those services and make those buildings stand alone. So we're in the process of that as well, going through that engineering analysis. Any other questions on this? We've got two more slides that kind of are similar to our conversation now. So let's just go on to the next one. This is just a slightly different version of a diagram we've looked at before that indicates the zones that we're likely going to need to keep or are using, and those that we would like to vacate and demolish, in part because the facilities don't have quite the capability to lead us into the future that the other ones do. Next slide. And this is the planning that's going on right now by the Space Optimization, Utilization, Programming, and Planning. Again, these are the objectives, and you can read through them, and we've talked about them before, but trying to lay out the criteria by which we're going to help ourselves make decisions about where people are best suited for their function and for the function of the organization. So what we're getting down to is ultimately an effort that looks similar to building a new building, where we'll have to work with stakeholder groups from each representative department to fully understand their operation, not only what they do, but how they relate to others, other departments on campus, to help us with coming up with a solid recommendation as to what to do. Any other questions on that? Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. And just wanted to give you a quick update. This is sort of our 90-day look ahead again, just a highlight of the activities. We actually talked about most of these already. Click close out. This campus parking study again, open space and parking comes into it because of how that either engages or our visitors and staff as well, and that sort of thing. In any event, complete those concept studies and continue our community engagement. Ambulatory enabling projects, get those completed. Outpatient health center, I will be coming back with more detail around how we're managing the cost and what the requirements are for that. And then the legacy buildings, I expect to be a fair bit along on a recommendation next time we get together. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. That's the last slide for this part of it. And next, I think, Karen, we don't have a written update this time, but Karen, I think you're prepared to provide a verbal update for the group.
Karen, you're muted.
Yep. Sorry about that. Not too much to update from last time because not much has happened. We've been focused on the Joint Commission survey and keeping our places warm for this winter. What I can tell you is that we closed out the year with 282 projects initiated. That's 113% more than we did in 2023. And as Jim pointed out, the total for that was $17.2 million compared to 9.1 million in 2024 or 2023. So we've had a very busy year. We've got a very busy capital plan that we've been reviewing with our finance team, and we're getting ready to kick that off.
Questions for Karen?
Pardon me?
Are there any questions for Karen for facilities? Okay. If not, that concludes the report for campus transformation and for facilities.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for the detailed updates, and it seems like we'll still have a lot to do in 2025. So it seems like you both will be very busy moving into our new year. So hearing this, I think we would now like to move into executive session. I'd like to ask for a motion to move into executive session to discuss hospital trade secrets as defined by ORC 1333.61. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
All right. I believe we'll do a roll call. Maureen D.
Yes.
Dumas.
Yes.
Ron D.
Yes.
Mike Summers.
Yes.
And I say yes. Are any other board members on the line?
Yes, John Moss. Yes.
Oh, hi, John. I didn't see you. All right. I have a yes from you. Thank you. So I think we can now ask the public to move out.
Sharon and Dr. Lewis, do you have the thing to pop into executive session?
I do.
Okay, join it. Go ahead and join. Okay, Dr. Walker, we are back in public session.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you, everyone. So we're now back on the record. Do I have any additional comments or concerns before we vote? We do have a recommendation to vote on. Hearing now none, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the recommendation for approval of expenditures for design, fabrication, and installation of interior and exterior signage. As we mentioned, this is part of a continuing process that has been going on for a while to standardize our signage across the organization, and this has been as part of our capital budget. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. This resolution will be sent to the full board for final approval. Are there any other business? Hearing none, I would like to go on record that we are finishing early, so not all of Dr. Walker's meeting. Maybe this is a new precedent for 2025. Dr. Walker will actually end meetings ahead of schedule. So, but don't hold me to that. So, thank you all for your time, for your time and attention, and we'll be talking shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.